The security manager grabbed Daniel Whitmore by the arm and told him to leave the building. Daniel looked down at the man's hand, then looked up, said nothing, just waited. He had been sitting in that lobby for 9 hours. 9 hours in the building his signature had built from nothing. 9 hours watching people he paid walk past him like he was furniture. And now, the man whose health insurance Daniel personally funded was trying to drag him out the front door. What happened in the next 60 seconds would change every single person, that company, forever. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe every person deserves dignity before they earn a title, hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel tells the stories that remind us who we really are. The alarm went off at 5:15. Daniel Whitmore was already awake. He had been lying in the dark for 20 minutes, listening to the sound of his daughter breathing through the baby monitor he still kept on his nightstand, even though Lily was 8 years old now and had told him 3 times last month that she was basically a grown-up. He kept the monitor anyway. Old habits from the years when she was sick with passing cold. When every sound she made in the night pulled him upright before his eyes were fully open. He kept it because the sound of her breathing was the one thing in his life that had never once felt complicated. He swung his legs off the bed, pressed his palms to his knees, and sat there for a moment in the dark. 54 years old, a bad left knee from a hiking accident 11 years ago, a lower back that started talking to him every morning around the second cup of coffee, a face that looked, according to his daughter, like a map of all the places you've been, Dad, which he had chosen to take as a compliment. He stood up and went to make her lunch. The kitchen was the room in the house that felt most like her, drawings taped to the refrigerator. A purple lunchbox with a broken zipper he kept meaning to replace. A handwritten list on the counter in Lily's looping second-grade print that said, "No pickles, no mustard, extra apple, please." He had found that list 6 months ago tucked under his coffee maker, like she was filing a formal complaint. And he had followed it without amendment every single day since. He made a turkey sandwich on whole wheat, cut it diagonally because she had once told him that triangles tasted better than rectangles. And he had never found a reason to argue. He added 2 small bags of crackers, a container of apple slices, and a folded napkin with a small note he wrote in blue pen. "Today is going to be a good day. I love ya, Dad." He did this every morning. He had done it alone for 3 years. Since the morning he came home from the hospital without Eleanor. He did not think about Eleanor every day. That was the thing people who had never lost a spouse didn't understand. You didn't grieve every hour. Grief didn't work on a schedule. It arrived sideways in the sound of a particular song on the radio, in the smell of coffee at a certain temperature, in the way Lily laughed sometimes with her whole body. Exactly the way her mother used to laugh. And Daniel would have to turn away and look at something else for a moment until the tightness in his chest passed. He folded the napkin, placed it on top of the sandwich, zipped the lunchbox. Then he went upstairs to wake Lily. 5 more minutes, she said without opening her eyes. She said it with such absolute authority that Daniel almost believed she had actually checked a clock. "You have exactly 4 minutes to be downstairs," he said. "After that, I eat the apple slices myself." One eye opened. It studied him. "You wouldn't." "I absolutely would." She was downstairs in 3.5 minutes. Hair half-combed, shoes on the wrong feet, carrying a stuffed elephant named Gerald, who had been everywhere she had ever been in her entire life. He dropped her at school at 7:50. She climbed out, turned back, and pointed at him with the kind of finger gun gesture she had picked up from a cartoon and now deployed. "Constantly remember," she said. "You promised we'd make tacos tonight, I remember. Real tacos. Not the kit. Liliad, fine. Real tacos." She gave him a look that said she was reserving the right to hold him to this. Then turned and ran toward the front doors where 2 of her friends were waiting. Both of them waving at Daniel like they knew him, which they did because he had shown up to every single school event since Lily started 1st grade, and most of the kids in her class thought of him as some kind of permanent fixture. He watched her until the doors closed behind her. Then he sat in the parking lot for a moment. Hands on the wheel, the car quiet. He reached into the back seat and picked up his old backpack. Canvas. Navy blue. One of the buckles was cracked. He had owned it for 9 years and had bought it from a discount shelf in a camping supply store when he was driving across 3 states, trying to find a location for his second office, and didn't have time to stop anywhere proper. He set it on the passenger seat. He started the car. He had built Whitmore Horizon Technologies over 22 years. Not built in the way wealthy men sometimes described building things, meaning they had provided the capital while other people did the work. Daniel had coded the first version of their flagship software himself, in a rented room above a dry cleaning business on the east side of the city. With a space heater that blew a fuse every 3 hours and a folding table he had found behind a dumpster and sanded down himself. He had made the first 12 sales calls personally. He had hired the first 6 employees from a stack of paper applications and interviewed each of them sitting on a crate because he hadn't bought chairs yet. He had grown it from nothing. From a room above a dry cleaning business to a glass headquarters, 12 stories high in the center of the city's financial district, with over 400 employees and a technology portfolio that 3 industry publications had described as, in various phrasing, quietly transformative. He was the majority owner. He was the founder. He was, technically, the chairman of the board, though he had handed day-to-day operations to his executive director 3 years ago, so he could be home every afternoon when Lily got off the bus. Most of his employees had never seen him in person. The anonymous messages had started arriving 4 weeks earlier. Not through official channels. Not through the HR complaint system. Daniel had spent 18 months building out with an outside firm specifically because he wanted people to be able to speak without fear. These messages came through a contact form on the company's public website, submitted one at a time from different email addresses over the course of 3 weeks. Someone careful, someone who didn't trust the internal systems. The first one said, "The people who run this company don't know what's happening on the lower floors." The second said, "Visitors get treated like problems depending on how they look. Nobody talks about it because nobody safe enough to talk to is watching." The third was longer, more specific. It described a pattern, a tone that had settled into the building like sediment. Invisible unless you were on the bottom looking up. People below a certain level had stopped raising concerns because the concerns went nowhere. The lobby staff categorized visitors before they were greeted. Workers without the right connections, the right clothing, the right confident stride, were handled differently than those who arrived with the unmistakable posture of someone who believed they belonged. Daniel had read that third message 3 times. Then he had called his assistant Margaret and told her to schedule a meeting with his executive director, Richard Holloway, for the following Tuesday. A real meeting, not a review session, a sit-down conversation, under Daniel's real name, no title, no CEO designation, no assistant accompanying him, no prior notification to the building staff. Daniel Whitmore, 9 o'clock, executive director's office. Margaret had been quiet for a moment on the phone. "You want to schedule it as yourself," she said, "but not as who you are." "I want to see what happens," he said. Another pause. "Daniel, I don't think you're going to like what you see." "I know," he said. "That's why I need to see it." He parked in a public garage, 2 blocks from the building. He walked. He was wearing a pair of dark chinos, a plain gray button-down shirt, and a fleece jacket he had owned for 6 years. His shoes were clean but not new. His watch was a mid-range sports watch he had bought for a charity marathon he'd run 2 years ago. His backpack was the navy canvas one from the back seat. He looked exactly like what he appeared to be. A tired, middle-aged man with sensible shoes and a quiet face. He pushed through the glass front doors of Whitmore Horizon Technologies at 8:47 in the morning. The lobby was exactly as he remembered it from the last time he'd visited unannounced, which had been 3 years ago, just after Eleanor died, when he'd stopped in one afternoon without thinking and stood in the center of the lobby for a long moment, just needing to be somewhere that belonged to him before going back to the house that felt like it had too many rooms. The lobby was high-ceilinged and well-lit. 3 reception desks arranged in a gentle arc, a seating area with modern furniture, digital display boards showing the company's quarterly initiative headlines. Behind the center desk sat a young woman in her mid-20s. Her name tag said Chloe Guest Experience. She was sharp-looking, professionally dressed, clearly trained to handle a high volume of visitors. She had the clipped, efficient energy of someone who had learned to assess a situation in under 10 seconds. She looked up when Daniel approached. He watched her eyes move over him once. It was fast, the way a camera shutter clicks. Half a second. But he had been a watchkeeper long enough to know what a full read looked like. And she had done one. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was professional.
Not warm exactly.
But not cold. The particular neutral tone of someone who had been taught to be courteous without being personal. "Good morning," Daniel said. "My name is Daniel Whitmore. I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Richard Holloway." She turned to her computer. Her fingers moved over the keyboard. The pause that followed was about 4 seconds long. Then she said, without looking up, "I'm not finding that." "It was scheduled 2 weeks ago," Daniel said. "My assistant confirmed it last Thursday." "What's your assistant's name?" "Margaret Collins." Chloe typed something. Another pause. "I'm not seeing anything under Whitmore," she said. She glanced up now. That same half-second read. Something settled in her expression, not rudeness exactly, but a kind of efficient dismissal. The way a door quietly closes without slamming. It's possible there was a miscommunication. Mr. Holloway's calendar is managed through his executive office, and these appointments don't always transfer to our system correctly. "Is there someone in his executive office I can speak with?" Daniel asked. "I can send a message. That would be helpful." She typed something brief. Her fingers moved with the confidence of someone who sent 100 such messages a day and expected about half of them to receive a timely response. "You're welcome to take a seat," she said. She gestured toward the waiting area. The gesture was the exact same gesture people use when they're finished with a conversation. Daniel nodded. "Thank you," he said. He picked up his backpack and walked to the seating area and sat down. He chose a chair that faced the room. He set his backpack on the floor beside him. He placed his coffee cup on the end table to his right. He did not take out his phone. He sat with his hands resting on his knees and he watched. By 9:15, the lobby had filled into its regular morning rhythm. Visitors arriving for meetings. Deliveries being processed at the side desk. Employees cutting through the lobby on their way from the parking structure elevator to the main elevator banks. Moving in the particular purposeful walk of people who knew where they were going and were already 5 minutes behind. Nobody looked at Daniel. Not in the way you look at someone in a public space where you've registered their presence. They looked through the space where he was sitting the way you look through a window at a wall. He was furniture. He was ambient. He was the chair and the end table and the potted plant in the corner. Kia, he had expected this. He had not expected how it would feel. At 9:30, a man in his 40s in a well-cut suit crossed the lobby with 2 other men in suits. Daniel recognized one of them, Marcus Webb, his head of strategic partnerships. Daniel had hired Marcus himself. 4 years ago, they had shaken hands in this building. They had eaten lunch together. They had spent 40 minutes once in a parking garage in Denver arguing cheerfully about the infield fly rule. Marcus walked within 6 feet of Daniel. Did not look at him once. Daniel watched Marcus's back disappear through the elevator doors. He breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth. Slowly, the way he'd learned to do in the years after Eleanor died when the doctor had told him. The only prescription he actually trusted was the one about breathing. At 10 o'clock, Chloe was replaced at the reception desk by a man named Bradley Daniel. Could see the name tag from where he sat, who was 20 minutes late for his shift and arrived with a large coffee and an expression that suggested he considered both the coffee and the late arrival to be completely appropriate given the circumstances. Bradley did not look at Daniel either. At 10:20, Daniel walked to the reception desk. "Excuse me," he said. I'm still waiting for a response from Mr. Holloway's office. Has there been any update? Bradley looked up from his computer with the expression of a man being interrupted in the middle of something important. Though Daniel could see from the angle that he had been scrolling. What's the name? Whitmore. Daniel Whitmore. I've been waiting since 8:45. Bradley typed something, looked at the screen, typed something else. I'm not seeing an appointment. I know. Chloe wasn't seeing it either. She sent a message to his executive office at around 9. Has there been any response? Bradley looked at the screen again. His expression did not suggest he was looking very hard. Nothing here, he said. Could you send a follow-up message? Bradley's expression shifted almost imperceptibly toward the territory of inconvenience. Not rudeness, not cruelty. Just the particular low-grade annoyance of a person who has decided, in some quiet and untested part of their brain, that this interaction is not the kind that requires full effort. I'll send one, he said. His tone said, I will technically do this thing. Thank you, Daniel said. He walked back to the chair. At 11 o'clock, Daniel watched 3 senior managers walk into the conference room, directly off the lobby, the one with the glass walls and the white board and the long table that he had sat at dozens of times in the early years when the building was new, and everything felt like it was being built in real time. He could see them through the glass. One of them, a woman he recognized as the head of human resources. Though he didn't know her name, was standing at the whiteboard, writing something in blue marker. He couldn't read it from where he was sitting, but he could see it was a list of some kind, several items. She underlined something twice. The other 2 were seated at the table, both with laptops open, both nodding as she spoke. He watched this for about a minute. Then the woman at the whiteboard said something that made all 3 of them laugh. Daniel turned and looked at the lobby floor. He thought about Lily at school right now. Probably at her 3rd period class, probably doing something with fractions, because she had told him last night, with the particular exhaustion of someone who had been pushed past their limit, that fractions were honestly, Dad, just opinions. He smiled at the floor. The most difficult thing about waiting when you knew you didn't have to wait was the absolute stillness it required. Daniel had spent his adult life in motion. Not the frantic motion of someone who didn't trust stillness, but the deliberate forward motion of a person who believed that things worth having required sustained effort over sustained time. He had learned this early, from his father, who had run a small landscaping business and worked every day of every week except Christmas and the 4th of July. Not because he loved working that much, but because he loved his family that much, and those were, in his understanding, the same thing. Daniel had grown up watching his father come home every evening with dirt under his fingernails and a genuine cheerfulness that had nothing to do with how easy the day had been. His father had been cheerful on the easy days and cheerful on the hard days, in exactly answent and not performing contentment, but actually possessing it. The way certain people possess a quality so thoroughly it becomes structural, like load-bearing walls. Daniel had tried to build that in himself. He sat in the chair, he watched his building. At 11:45, a young woman with a lanyard that identified her as an HR coordinator crossed the lobby carrying a stack of folders and dropped several of them 3 feet from where Daniel was sitting. Papers scattered across the floor. A few slid under the edge of the low coffee table beside his chair. Daniel was already leaning forward before the papers finished sliding. He collected the loose sheets, checked they were right side up, and gathered the scattered folders. He handed them to the young woman with both hands. "Oh," she said, startled. "Thank you. Sorry I wasn't watching." "No trouble at all," Daniel said. She took the folders, looked at him, looked at the lobby. Then she leaned slightly toward him, the way people do when they're about to say something they consider both true and slightly impolite. "I don't mean to be weird," she said, "but how long have you been waiting there?" "Since about 8:45. Her face changed. "That's almost 3 hours. "It is," Daniel agreed. She glanced toward the reception desk. Something worked across her expression, something between discomfort and calculation. Then she said, quietly, They should probably get someone to actually call up to Holloway's office. Like, call, not just message. I'd appreciate that, Daniel said. She looked at the desk again, then at Daniel. Then she seemed to make a small internal decision. Okay, she said. She shifted the folders under one arm and walked to the reception desk. Daniel watched her lean across the counter and say something to Bradley in a low voice. Bradley's expression did not change significantly. He picked up the desk phone and dialed. A brief conversation. A pause. Bradley hung up. The HR coordinator came back. They said they'll pass the message along, she said. She did not look like she found this satisfying either. Thank you, Daniel said. I appreciate you trying. She started to leave. Stopped. Do you want me to get you a water or something? From the break room? It's just on the second floor. I'm fine, Daniel said. But thank you. That's very kind, she nodded. Left. Daniel watched her go. In 9 hours in this building, she was the first person who had treated him like a man sitting in a chair instead of an object occupying space. He filed that away. Noon arrived. The lobby shifted into its midday rhythm. People moving in and out with lunch bags, with takeout containers, with the particular loosened posture of people briefly released from their desks. Laughter from the elevator area. The reception desk briefly unmanned while Bradley went to do whatever Bradley did at noon. Daniel ate the small lunch he had packed for himself that morning, a sandwich, some crackers, a bottle of water. He ate it quietly at the same chair he had occupied for 3 hours. His backpack on the floor beside him. His coffee cup long empty. A man passing through the lobby on his way to the exit glanced at Daniel eating, and then glanced at the reception desk, and then at Daniel again with an expression that was brief and legible. Are they going to deal with that? The man left. Daniel ate his sandwich. At 12:30, he heard the conference room. Off the lobby, the one with the glass walls open. The 3 managers emerged. They were in the middle of a conversation. The HR director was talking. Still animated. Still in the register of someone working through a problem they found genuinely engaging. The issue isn't the policy itself. It's implementation, she was saying. People don't feel heard because there's no visible follow-through. They submit concerns, and they don't see anything change, and then they just stop submitting. Right, said one of the men with her. The mechanism exists, but the culture hasn't caught up to the mechanism. Exactly, she said. They walked past Daniel without looking at him. He watched them go. The woman, who had just spent 2 hours in a conference room 20 feet from him discussing why employees didn't feel heard, had walked past the man who had been sitting in her lobby for 3.5 hours without being helped. Daniel set his empty water bottle back in his bag. He breathed in, breathed out. The afternoon was harder than the morning. The morning had the energy of beginning, the alertness that comes with arriving somewhere and watching a system come to life. The afternoon was something else. The afternoon was the long, flat middle of a thing, the place where you had to decide whether you were going to see it through. Daniel had always been someone who saw things through. He thought about the first year after Eleanor died. He thought about the specific weight of those months, the paperwork, the phone calls, the logistics of grief that nobody prepares you for. The way you had to keep functioning through the fog, because there was a child in the house who needed breakfast and a bath, and someone to read to her at night. And the grief had to wait or at least agree to happen in the margins. He had seen that through. This was a chair in a lobby. At 2 o'clock, a well-dressed man in his early 40s arrived at reception. Gave his name with the particular brisk confidence of someone who had done this before and expected it to take 30 seconds. And was indeed escorted to the elevator within 90 seconds. He glanced at Daniel on his way past. The glance said nothing. It was the glance of a person who had looked in a direction, not at a person. At 2:30, a young couple arrived and sat in the waiting area near Daniel. They were clearly nervous, you could see it in the way they sat. Perched at the edge of their chairs, the way people sit when they don't feel like they have permission to settle in. Job applicants, Daniel guessed. They spoke in low voices. After 20 minutes, someone from the second floor came down and took them up. Daniel watched them go. He wondered if they got the jobs. He hoped they did. At 3 o'clock, Daniel went back to the reception desk. Chloe had returned. She had the careful, neutral professionalism of someone who remembered him, and was not entirely comfortable about the duration of his presence, but was not sure how to address us. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, not warmly, but with a version of his name, which was something. "Any update?" he asked. "I've sent 3 messages to Mr. Holloway's office," she said. "I haven't received a response. Have you tried calling directly?" A small pause. "I did try at around 1. The line went to voicemail." "Did you leave a message?" "I did." Daniel looked at her, not with anger, just with steady attention. The kind that sometimes made people feel the full weight of what they were saying. "Miss Bennett," he said, reading her name tag. "I've been here since 8:45 this morning. That's 6 hours. I have a confirmed appointment with Mr. Holloway that was scheduled and confirmed 2 weeks ago. Is there anyone else in this building, a deputy, an executive assistant, anyone with the authority to reach Mr. Holloway's office directly and confirm this appointment that you could contact on my behalf?" Chloe held his gaze. Something moved in her face. It was not rudeness, and it was not kindness. It was the particular discomfort of a person who has begun to notice the gap between what they should be doing and what they are doing. "I can try the executive floor directly," she said. "I'd really appreciate that," Daniel said. She did try. The call was brief. She came back to Daniel with an expression that he could not entirely read. "Mr. Holloway's an executive assistant says he doesn't have a record of a 9 o'clock appointment today with a Mr. Whitmore," she said. She said it's possible the request wasn't submitted through the correct scheduling portal. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Where does the correct scheduling portal send requests?" he asked. "To his assistant, I believe." "And who reviews those requests?" "His assistant." Daniel nodded slowly. "So if an appointment wasn't entered into the correct portal," he said, "the assistant would have no record. And if the assistant has no record, she can't confirm the appointment. And if she can't confirm the appointment, I continue to wait." Chloe did not respond to this, because there was nothing to say to it. It was true. "I'll keep trying," she said. "Thank you," Daniel said. He picked up his backpack. "I'll be right there." He pointed to the chair. The same chair. He had been sitting in it for 6 hours. He went back to it. At 4:15, the shift changed again at reception. A third employee arrived, a man named Tom, according to his name tag, who had the slightly glazed look of someone who had gotten less sleep than he needed and was relying on coffee to bridge the gap. Bradley briefed him in low tones. Tom glanced in Daniel's direction. His eyes moved to the clock, then back to the screen. He did not make eye contact with Daniel. Daniel was watching a man in a well-cut suit near the elevator bay talking on his phone. Pacing slightly, his voice too low to make out words but his body language clear, he was in the middle of something contentious. Something with actual stakes. The man's face was tight. His free hand moved as he spoke, punctuating something invisible. Daniel recognized something in that posture. He had worn it himself, more times than he could count. The posture of someone who believed the thing they were fighting for was worth the fight. He missed that sometimes. He had chosen, 3 years ago, to step back from that level of daily combat. He had made the choice deliberately, with both hands, and he had not regretted it. But there were moments sitting in the waiting room of a hospital while Lily had her tonsils out, standing on the sideline of her soccer game, watching her sprint after a ball, with complete reckless confidence, when he felt the ghost of that version of himself walking alongside him. And he acknowledged it, and let it pass. He was exactly where he wanted to be, just not in the way he'd expected to be when he arrived this morning. At 4:45, Daniel's phone rang. He looked at the screen. "Lily's school," he answered immediately. "Hello, Mr. Whitmore? This is Mrs. Kapoor, Lily's teacher. Nothing to worry about, she's completely fine. But she fell during recess and scraped her knee. And she's asking for you. The nurse cleaned it up, but she's a little upset." Daniel was already standing. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "She's okay." "Mr. Whitmore, really?" "I know," he said. But she asked for me. I'll be there. He picked up his backpack. He looked at the reception desk. He looked at the lobby. He looked at the chair he had occupied for nearly 8 hours. He set the backpack back down. He sat back down. He pulled out his phone and called Lily directly. She answered on the second ring. Dad? Her voice had the particular quaver of someone trying very hard not to cry about something that was actually upsetting them, which was something she had inherited directly from him. This refusal to let crying happen while it was happening. The determination to hold it off through sheer will. I'm here, he said. I hear Mrs. Kapoor called. My knee hurts, I know. She said you scraped it. It bled a lot. A pause. Well, quite a lot. Okay. Are you coming? He closed his eyes for a second. I am coming, he said. But listen, I'm in the middle of something important. Something I started and I need to finish. Mrs. Kapoor said you're okay. The nurse said you're okay and I trust them. But I am coming. Tonight we are making real tacos. No kit. You have my complete word. A pause. How long? She asked. Not long. Maybe an hour. A longer pause. He could hear her breathing. Doing the math on an hour in the way 8-year-olds do. Measuring it against the size of the thing she was feeling. Okay, she said. She said it with the solemn acceptance of someone who had decided to trust him, which she always did, which was the thing that got him every time. I love you, he said. I love you too, she said. Dad, yeah. Real tacos means guacamole. Yes, he said, it does. He hung up. He sat for a moment with the phone in his hand and the lobby moving around him. Indifferent, ambient, continuous. He thought about Lily sitting in the nurse's office with a scraped knee, trying not to cry. He thought about the 8 hours he had been in this building. He thought about the anonymous messages. The pattern described in careful, considered words by someone who didn't trust the system enough to use it. The sediment. The invisible division between people who belonged and people who were managed. He looked around the lobby. 411 people worked in this building. He knew that number. He had looked it up this morning before he got out of the car. He had started this company with 411 people, and in 8 hours, in the building that bore his name and ran on his decisions and existed, because he had believed in something hard enough and long enough to make it real in 8 hours. Exactly one person had offered him a glass of water. One. He pulled his phone out again and sent a text to Margaret. It said, I've seen enough. Come down. He put the phone back in his bag. He sat. He thought about his father's hands. Dirt under the fingernails. The particular cheerfulness of a man who had decided to be okay with what the day asked of him. He thought about Eleanor on their third date, sitting across from him in a restaurant he couldn't afford, telling him she didn't care about the restaurant, she cared about the conversation. She cared about the fact that he had opinions about things and held them lightly enough to revise. That he knew how to listen, that he laughed at the right moments, that he was paying attention. He had been paying attention for 32 years. He was paying attention now. He looked at the lobby. He saw a company that had grown beyond the values that built it. He saw people who had been taught efficiency before they were taught decency. He saw a culture where the person in the chair was only as visible as their presentation suggested they should be, and he saw, in the chair beside his, the one where the young job applicants had sat that afternoon, perched at the edge, nervous, hoping he saw how it must feel. To come somewhere that held your future, to sit and wait, to wonder if you were seen. The elevator opened, and then everything changed. The elevator opened and Margaret Collins stepped out. She was 61 years old, 5'4", and had worked for Daniel for 19 years. She had outlasted 3 executive restructurings, 2 economic downturns, and 1 very ill-advised attempt by a board member to convince Daniel to move the company's headquarters to another state. She had the kind of quiet authority that came not from title or volume, but from the absolute certainty with which she moved through any room she entered. She always knew exactly where she was going and exactly what she intended to do when she got there. The moment she cleared the elevator threshold, she stopped. Her eyes found Daniel across the lobby in under 2 seconds. He was sitting in the same chair he had occupied for 8 hours, backpack on the floor, Coffee cup long empty. The same patient stillness he had carried all day, like a coat he had put on that morning, and not once taken off. He looked, she thought, exactly like what he had spent this entire day being mistaken for a quiet man with nowhere important to be. Except she had worked for him for 19 years. And she knew what was behind that stillness. She walked toward him. Her heels on the lobby floor made a sound that was not loud but carried. The kind of sound that moves through a room and makes people look up without knowing why they looked up. The receptionist on duty, Tom, according to his name tag, looked up. And then he looked at Daniel. And then he looked at Margaret again. And something in the quality of her walk, the precision of her direction, the complete absence of hesitation in her stride, made him sit up slightly straighter without fully understanding why. Margaret reached Daniel and stopped. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. Not quietly, not loudly. In her normal voice, which was a voice built for clarity. Tom heard it. The security's desk attendant near the side entrance heard it. 2 employees passing through the lobby on their way to the parking structure heard it and slowed without stopping. Daniel looked up at Margaret. Something passed between them, not words. Just the compressed communication of 2 people who had worked alongside each other long enough to have a private shorthand. "How long have you been here?" she asked. 8 hours and a few minutes, he said. Margaret turned and looked at the reception desk. She turned back. She looked at the lobby. She looked at the conference room with the glass walls where, earlier that afternoon, the HR director had been discussing why employees didn't feel heard. She looked at Daniel. "Are you ready?" she said. "In a moment," he said. He stood up. He bent and picked up his backpack and slung it over one shoulder. The way he always did. The way that looked like a man with nowhere to be and nothing to prove. Then he straightened up, and he looked around the lobby. He looked at it the way you look at something you built. The way you look at a thing you believed in hard enough and long enough that it became real. He looked at the reception desk, and the elevator banks in the conference room with its glass walls, and the seating area with its modern furniture, and the digital display boards showing his company's name in clean corporate lettering. He stood in the center of his own lobby, and he looked at the place he had built from a room above a dry cleaning business with a space heater that blew a fuse every 3 hours. Then Tom said, from behind the desk, in a voice that was trying for professional and landing somewhere near uncertain, "Excuse me, sir. Is everything all right? Were you helped today?" Daniel turned and looked at him. Tom looked back. He was maybe 24. He had the face of someone who had just realized the geography of the room had shifted in a way he didn't entirely understand, but understood enough to know he should pay attention. "Nobody has been able to locate my appointment," Daniel said. "I've been waiting since 8:45. That's all. Call up to." Tom reached for the desk phone. "No," Daniel said. Tom stopped. "I don't need you to call anyone," Daniel said. His voice was not cold. It was the voice of someone who had made a decision and was moving through it. "I just need you to answer one question for me." Tom nodded. Slowly. "Did anyone at any point today offer to bring me a cup of coffee? Or water? Or ask if there was someone they could reach for me? Or wonder, out loud, why a man had been sitting in this lobby since morning?" Tom's mouth opened. Nothing came out, which was its own answer. Daniel nodded once. "Thank you," he said. He picked up his empty coffee cup from the end table, looked at it briefly, and placed it back down. Then he turned to Margaret and said, "Call Richard Holloway's office and tell his assistant that Daniel Whitmore, the chairman of this board, is in the lobby and will be in the conference room in 10 minutes. Tell her I'd like Richard there as well." Margaret was already dialing before he finished the sentence. Daniel turned and walked to the conference room. He pushed the door open and went inside and sat down at the long table, the one he had sat at dozens of times in the early years. In meetings that started at 7 in the morning and sometimes didn't end until midnight. When the company was new enough that every decision felt load-bearing. He sat down, set his backpack on the table in front of him, and folded his hands and waited. 2 minutes passed, then 3. Then the door opened and Chloe Bennett stepped in. She was not alone. Behind her was a woman Daniel didn't recognize, mid-40s. Sharply dressed. The particular posture of someone in a senior administrative role. The woman's expression was controlled but not entirely stable, like something underneath it was working hard. Chloe stopped inside the door. "I'm sorry to bother you," Chloe said. "But I don't." She stopped, started again. "I was told that you're Mr. Whitmore, the Mr. Whitmore." Daniel looked at her evenly. "I'm Daniel Whitmore," he said. "Yes." Chloe's face did something complicated. The professional neutrality she had maintained all day, the efficient remove of a person trained to manage visitors without becoming involved with them, came apart in a way that was visible and human and real. "I didn't know," she said. Daniel said nothing. "I mean, I know that doesn't. I know that's not." She stopped, took a breath. "I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. Not because of who you are. Because of how long you sat there. I should have done more. I could have done more. I sent messages and I made one phone call. And then I let it go." She stood there with her hands at her sides and her face entirely open, and that, Daniel thought, was actually the thing. Not the apology. The openness. The willingness to stand in front of something uncomfortable and not flinch away from it. "Sit down, Miss Bennett," he said. She looked surprised. "Please," he said. She sat. The woman behind her hesitated, then moved to the side of the room and stood near the wall. Still watching, Daniel rested his forearms on the table. "Tell me," he said, "when I walked in this morning, when you looked at me across the desk, what did you think?" Chloe was quiet for a moment. She was deciding whether to answer carefully or honestly. He watched her decide. "I thought you were probably not in the right place," she said. "Why?" Another pause. "Because of how you looked," she said. And the honesty of that, the plain, undecorated honesty of it, was harder to hear than an excuse would have been. And also more useful. "Tell me what you mean by that," Daniel said. Chloe looked at the table, then at him. The people who come in for executive meetings look a certain way," she said. There's a kind of confidence. Like they already know the appointment is real. Like they expect to be taken care of. You didn't look like that. You looked like someone who was hoping it would work out." Daniel held her gaze. "And that made you less likely to make it work out," he said. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both understood it was not a question. "I'm not going to tell you that your instincts are wrong," Daniel said. "I'm going to tell you that your instincts are trained. Someone trained them. And the question is, who trained them? And what they were told they were optimizing for. Did anyone in your onboarding, in your training, in any meeting or memo or guideline you've ever been given, did anyone ever say to you, the quality of care you give a visitor should be the same, regardless of how they arrive?" Chloe thought about it. "No," she said. "Did anyone say the opposite?" "No," she said again. "Nobody said anything. You watched the other people. And you learned from watching." The door opened. Richard Holloway came in. Richard was 52. Handsome in the broad, uncomplicated way of men who had played college sports and kept most of it into middle age. With silver at his temples and the particular energy of someone who had been told, many times over many years, that he was the most capable person in whatever room he was in. He had that energy with him now. As he came through the door, the brisk, gathering energy of a man walking into a situation he intended to manage. He stopped when he saw Daniel. Not because he recognized him. He had met Daniel exactly once. At a board dinner 2 years ago, and the meeting had been brief and formal, and Daniel had been wearing a suit that night, and was flanked by 3 board members, and had looked, Richard thought at the time, exactly like what the situation required. The man sitting at the table in the gray button-down and worn fleece jacket looked nothing like that person. Richard looked at Margaret, who was standing near the door. Margaret said, "Richard, this is Daniel Whitmore." A beat. Richard's eyes moved to Daniel. Back to Margaret. Back to Daniel. "Sit down, Richard," Daniel said. The thing about Daniel's voice when he said something like that, not loud, not threatening, not heavy with implications, was that it was simply final. The way a door closing is final. Not aggressive. Just done. Richard sat down. He looked at Daniel across the table. He started. I didn't receive my assistant, said there was a message about an appointment. But the scheduling request wasn't in the correct portal. So she didn't, I know, Daniel said. I've been told that several times today. Richard stopped. I scheduled that appointment 2 weeks ago, Daniel said. My assistant confirmed it. The intention was to come in for a conversation with you. No special treatment. No announcement. A man with an appointment, sitting in the lobby, waiting for a meeting. Richard's jaw moved slightly. He was processing. In 8 hours, Daniel said. The following happened. The receptionist told me my appointment didn't exist and stopped engaging with meaningful effort after approximately 15 minutes. Messages were sent to your office twice and a single phone call was made, none of which were escalated when they received no response. A security manager was notified at some point this afternoon that there was a visitor who had been waiting an extended time and might need to be moved. And exactly one person out of every employee who walked through or worked in this lobby today offered me anything. A young woman from HR who dropped some folders and asked if I wanted a glass of water. Richard said nothing. Your HR director held a 2-hour meeting in that conference room. Daniel tilted his head toward the glass wall. About employee culture. About people not feeling heard. She was 20 feet away from me for 2 hours. Richard closed his eyes briefly. I wasn't trying to catch anyone, Daniel said. I want to be clear about that. This was not a test designed to end careers. It was a question I needed answered. I received anonymous reports from employees, over multiple weeks describing a culture of invisibility. People below a certain level who had stopped raising concerns because nothing changed. Visitors who were handled differently based on how they presented. A gap between the values on our website and the values in the room, he paused. I needed to know if it was real. Silence. Is it real? Richard, Daniel asked. Richard looked at the table, then at Daniel. Yes, he said. He said it flatly. Without drama, with the particular weight of a man confirming something he had known, and chosen not to engage with at the level it required. Yes, it's real. That answered the plainness of it. The absence of defensiveness was something Daniel had not expected. He held it for a moment. Good, Daniel said. That's where we start. Chloe was watching this exchange from her chair against the wall with the careful stillness of someone who understood they were present at something significant and did not want to disturb it by being noticed. But Daniel turned to her now, deliberately. Miss Bennett, he said, you're not in this room because you're in trouble. You're in this room because you were honest with me just now about something most people wouldn't have been honest about. I want you to remember this conversation, not because of who I am, but because of what it means. Chloe nodded. Every person who walks through that door out there has a story you don't know, Daniel said. Every person who sits in that waiting area is waiting for something that matters to them. They may not look like it. They may arrive without confidence or expensive clothes or the posture of someone who expects to be taken care of, and the way you treat them, the small, daily, unconsidered way you treat them, is the culture of this company. Not the mission statement, not the quarterly review, the 30 seconds when someone walks up to your desk and you decide what they're worth. He stopped. The room was very quiet. From somewhere outside the conference room through the glass walls, Daniel could see the lobby going about its late afternoon business. People crossing the floor. An elevator opening and closing. The reception desk where Chloe had sat this morning and assessed him in half a second and made a quiet, untested, consequential decision. We're going to fix this, Daniel said. He said it simply. Without flourish. The way his father had said things like that as plain statement of intent, carrying no drama because it needed none, not with a memo, not with a one-day training. We're going to understand how we got here, and then we're going to build something different. And it's going to take time, and it's going to require honesty from a lot of people who have learned that honesty in this building costs more than it returns. He looked at Richard. That starts with you, he said. Richard met his eyes. I know, he said. Daniel nodded. He pulled his phone from his pocket and looked at the time. It was 5:42. He thought of Lily in the nurse's office, holding a scraped knee, trying not to cry, deciding to trust him when he said he'd be there. He stood up, picked up his backpack, slung it over one shoulder. "I have to go make tacos," he said. Nobody in the room laughed. Then Chloe made a small sound. Not quite a laugh. Something in between. Caught somewhere in the back of her throat. The involuntary sound a person makes when something is both absurd and entirely true. Daniel looked at her. For the first time all day, he smiled. It was not the smile of a powerful man being generous. It was the smile of a father who needed to get home. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on it. "Margaret," he said. "Already on it," she said. He nodded. Pushed the door open. Walked out through the lobby he had built. With his old backpack over one shoulder and his empty coffee cup collected from the end table on his way past. And pushed through the glass front doors of Whitmore Horizon Technologies and stepped out into the early evening. He called Lily from the sidewalk. She answered on the first ring this time. "I'm on my way," he said. "Guacamole," she said. "Guacamole," he confirmed. He put the phone in his pocket and walked toward the parking garage 2 blocks away. His fleece jacket open in the early evening air, his worn shoes on the concrete. Invisible to everyone he passed. Exactly the way he had arrived that morning. Except nothing. After today was going to be the same. The tacos were good. Daniel stood at the stove for 40 minutes. Cooking the meat, low and slow the way his father had taught him. With cumin and dried chili, and a patience that the jarred seasoning packets never allowed for. Lily sat on the counter beside him, not at the counter. On it, her legs swinging, her scraped knee wrapped in a bandage with cartoon dogs on it that she had selected herself from the nurse's collection, with what she described as a very serious process. She talked the whole time he cooked. She talked about the scrape, and how it happened, a collision near the monkey bars involving 2 other kids, and a misunderstanding about whose turn it was, and about fractions, and about a book she was reading, and about a girl named Sophie who had, apparently, said something at lunch that Lily found both confusing and irritating, and had been thinking about ever since. Daniel listened to all of it. He asked follow-up questions at the right moments. He handed her a slice of avocado to taste test and accepted her verdict that it needed more lime without argument. He was home. Whatever had happened in that building today, whatever was going to happen in the days that followed, it was on the other side of this kitchen. On the other side of the front door, on the other side of the particular gravity of a small girl with a cartoon bandage and strong opinions about guacamole. He was home. And for 2 hours, that was enough. Later, after Lily was in bed, and the dishes were done, and the house had settled into its nighttime quiet, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and his phone, and started reading. Margaret had sent him a summary. 12 bullet points. He knew she thought in bullet points, even when she delivered information, in full sentences of everything she had observed and recorded that day. Floor, access logs showing visitor, wait times. Reception desk call records. A note at the bottom that said simply, "This is worse than the messages suggested. We need to talk tomorrow." He set the phone down. He looked at the refrigerator with Lily's drawings on it. He thought about the HR director in the conference room. 20 feet from him for 2 hours, talking about why people didn't feel heard. He thought about Richard Holloway saying yes in that flat, honest, undefended voice. He thought about Chloe Bennett saying, "You looked like someone who was hoping it would work out." He picked his phone back up and typed a message to Margaret. 7 a.m., my office, bring everything. Then he turned off the kitchen light and went to check on Lily. She was asleep with Gerald, the elephant tucked under her chin and one arm thrown over the side of the bed at the improbable angle that children achieve in sleep and adults can only wonder at. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Watching her breathe, he thought, I am doing this for you. I am doing this so that when you walk into a room someday, any room for any reason, someone sees you before they see what you're wearing. Then he went to bed. He did not sleep well. He had known he wouldn't. The thing about having seen something clearly is that you cannot unsee it. You can manage what you do with it. You can control the pace and the shape of the response. But the image itself is permanent. He had sat in that lobby for 8 hours, and what he had seen was not one person failing to be kind. What he had seen was a system, a set of unspoken agreements about who mattered and who didn't, operating so far below the level of conscious choice that the people inside it couldn't see it any more than fish can see water. That was the hardest part. Not the neglect, the invisibility of the neglect. He stared at the ceiling. He thought about the first hire he'd ever made. A programmer named Kevin, who had arrived for the interview 20 minutes early and sat in Daniel's hallway because Daniel didn't have a lobby yet, didn't have a reception desk, barely had a company, and waited quietly without complaint. Kevin had been Daniel's age at the time. Mid-30s, coming off a layoff, visibly nervous, in the particular way of someone who needed this to work. Daniel had hired him before the interview was half over. Not because Kevin was the most technically impressive candidate, but because of the specific quality of his waiting, the patience of it, the dignity. Kevin had retired from Whitmore Horizon 6 years ago after 22 years with the company. He still sent Daniel a Christmas card every year. Daniel thought about Kevin in that hallway. He thought about the young couple he had watched that afternoon, perched at the edge of the waiting room chairs, nervous, hoping. He thought about everyone who had ever sat in any chair in that lobby, and hoped. He closed his eyes. By 6 in the morning, he was already dressed. The call from Richard Holloway came at 6:47. While Daniel was driving Lily to school, he let it go to voicemail. Lily was in the middle of a detailed explanation of why Gerald the elephant would not, under any circumstances, be able to survive in Antarctica, and he was not going to interrupt that for Richard Holloway. He listened to the voicemail in the school parking lot, after Lily had given him her finger gun goodbye and disappeared through the front doors. Richard's voice was careful, measured. The voice of a man who had spent the night deciding how to be honest without being fully exposed. Which was a difficult balance and one Daniel recognized, because he had spent his own career learning to navigate it. "Daniel," Richard said on the voicemail, "I spent last night thinking, I want to be direct with you when we meet. There are things I should have brought to you months ago, and I didn't. I need you to know that I understand the severity of what you saw yesterday, and I need to tell you some things that are going to be uncomfortable. I'll be in your office at 7. Daniel played it once more. Then he put the car in gear and drove to the building. He parked in his usual spot in the executive garage, not the public garage, 2 blocks away. Not today, and rode the elevator up and walked through the executive floor, which at this hour was mostly empty, the overhead lights still in their overnight dimmed mode, the hum of the building warming up around him. Margaret was already at her desk when he came in. She looked at him over her reading glasses. "Before you go in," she said, and held out a folder. He took it, opened it. It was the visitor log for the previous 6 months. She had highlighted entries in yellow. He counted 8 that had wait times of over 90 minutes recorded with no documented follow-up. 3 that had wait times of over 3 hours. 1, a note from 4 months ago about a woman who had arrived for a scheduled interview with the head of engineering and had waited 2 hours and 40 minutes before leaving without being seen. That had no documentation at all. Nothing, no incident report. No apology record, no follow-up contact. Her name was Patricia Simmons, Margaret said. She was applying for a senior developer position. She sent an email 3 days after to HR. The email was marked read and not responded to. Daniel closed the folder. "How many of our current employees," he said, "are we holding right now only because the people who didn't get through the door aren't here to tell us what they saw?" Margaret looked at him for a moment. "That's the right question," she said. He nodded, went into his office. Richard was already there. He was standing near the window with his hands in his pockets, looking out at the city in the early morning light. He turned when Daniel came in. He looked like a man who had not slept, which Daniel understood because he had looked the same way in the mirror at 6 this morning. "Sit down, Richard," Daniel said, not with the authority of yesterday evening, just simply, the way you'd say it to someone you needed to have a real conversation with. They both sat. "Talk," Daniel said. Richard put both hands on the desk in front of him, flat, like someone settling their weight before lifting something heavy. The culture in this building started changing about 18 months ago, he said. It started when we brought in a new operations director, Marcus Webb. You hired Marcus. Go. Daniel said nothing. Marcus runs a tight operation, Richard said. Measurably tight. Our processing times improved. Our client response metrics improved. Our internal efficiency ratings went up across the board. On paper, he is one of the best operational hires we've made in a decade. And off paper? Daniel said. Richard looked at his hands. He runs on metrics, Richard said. And when you run on metrics, everything that isn't being measured stops mattering. Visitor satisfaction? Not measured. Internal belonging scores? Not measured. The quality of how people in this building treat people who have nothing to offer them in the moment of interaction. He paused. Not measured. So it stopped being prioritized, Daniel said. It stopped being visible, Richard said. That's different. People didn't decide to stop treating visitors with dignity. They just stopped being evaluated on it. And in a culture where evaluation is everything, not being evaluated is the same as being told it doesn't count. Daniel leaned back in his chair. And you saw that's happening, he said. Richard looked at him directly. The honesty from last night was still there. Still holding. I saw parts of it, he said. I saw the efficiency going up. And I told myself the rest would follow, that if the operations were strong, the culture would stabilize around them. I was wrong. He stopped. Then, I was also comfortable. And that's worse. I was comfortable with the results I was seeing, and I didn't go looking for the results I wasn't seeing. That's on me. Daniel held that. In 22 years of building this company, he had sat across from a lot of people in this chair. People who deflected. People who repositioned. People who took a genuine failure and performed their way through a version of accountability that left the substance of perfectly intact. He had learned to recognize the performance. What Richard was doing was not the performance. It was actual accountability. In the quiet, unglamorous form it usually took not dramatic self-flagellation, but plain acknowledgement of what had been chosen, and what had been avoided and why. Daniel respected it, even as it made him angrier, because the problem with genuine accountability was that it didn't make the thing happen less true. It just meant you were dealing with someone honest enough to be part of fixing it. Tell me about Patricia Simmons, Daniel said. Richard's face shifted. What? The woman who waited 2 hours and 40 minutes for her interview with engineering 4 months ago, and left without being seen and sent an email that was never answered. Richard stared at him. How do you— Margaret, Daniel said simply. Richard rubbed a hand across his jaw. I didn't know about that specific case, he said. I need to be honest with you, I didn't know. But I should have known. The system where I would have known about it doesn't exist. There's no escalation path for that kind of thing. A visitor leaves unhappy, or doesn't get seen, and unless someone files an incident report, which nobody does for a missed interview, because it's uncomfortable, and there's no form for it, it disappears. Find her, Daniel said. Richard looked at him. Patricia Simmons. Find her. Get her contact information from the HR records of her application. I want to call her personally, Daniel. Not to fix a PR problem, Daniel said, reading the hesitation correctly. Because she drove here and waited 2 hours and 40 minutes and sent an email into a void and deserved better than any of that. And someone should say so. Richard nodded. Okay, said. Okay. They were quiet for a moment. Outside the office, the floor was beginning to fill. Daniel could hear the sounds of the building coming to life, footsteps. Conversations at a distance, the particular ambient hum of 400 people starting their day. 400 people. 400 people who came to this building every morning carrying their own stories, their own complicated loyalties to this place, their own quiet assessments of whether they were valued or merely used. 400 people who were, all of them, both the problem and the solution, simultaneously, in ways they couldn't fully see from inside it. I'm bringing in an independent firm, Daniel said. Culture audit, full scope, reception practices, visitor management, internal complaint follow-through, HR response rates, the whole structure. I want the data, not the impression. Richard nodded. I also want to talk to the anonymous sender, Daniel said. Richard looked up. The person who sent the messages through the public contact form, Daniel said. Someone in this building was careful enough and concerned enough to find a way around every internal channel and reach me directly. I don't want to expose them. I want to find a way to tell them that what they did mattered. That someone was listening. He paused. Because that's the other thing this building forgot. That when someone decides to trust the system enough to say something, the system has to answer. The door to his office opened. Margaret put her head in. Her expression had the particular quality of controlled urgency she used when something needed immediate attention. But she was choosing not to alarm anyone unnecessarily. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said. Daniel, there's a situation. What kind? The kind that happens when a company's visitor logs from the past 6 months get accessed at 6 in the morning, and the access shows up on the system flag. She looked at Richard. Someone from Marcus Webb's team noticed. Marcus is on his way up. Richard sat forward. Daniel was still. Does Marcus know I'm here? Daniel asked. He knows someone accessed the logs, Margaret said. He doesn't know it was you. He thinks it was Richard. Looked at Richard. Richard looked back at him. Something shifted between them, not exactly an alliance, but the beginning of one. How long? Daniel said. 3 minutes, Margaret said. Close the door, Daniel said. Margaret closed the door. Daniel looked at Richard across the desk. Tell me about Marcus, he said. Everything. Right now. 3 minutes. Richard leaned forward. Marcus is good at his job, he said. Speaking faster now, the compressed urgency of a man who has been given a countdown. He's also the reason half of the operational improvements look good on paper. He built the efficiency metrics from scratch. He knows where every number comes from and he controls how they're reported. And, Daniel said, because there was clearly an and. And there are 3 employees on the lower operational floors, people who work directly on 666's team, who have filed internal complaints in the past 4 months. About being pushed to close visitor interactions quickly rather than helpfully. About being evaluated on throughput rather than quality. About being told, directly, that their performance ratings depended on volume, not experience. Who told them that? Daniel said. Marcus's direct report, a supervisor named Greg Ferris. And these complaints went where? To HR, Richard said, and they were reviewed. And the determination was that the guidance given was within operational parameters. Daniel looked at him. Who reviewed them? He said. Richard looked at his hands. Marcus sits on the HR review committee, he said. The room was very quiet. 3 complaints, filed by 3 people below a certain level. About a culture of efficiency over dignity, reviewed by the architect of that culture, who had determined his own culture was within parameters. The anonymous messages suddenly made complete sense. They hadn't come through internal channels, because the person who sent them had understood precisely why internal channels were not safe. A knock at the door. Margaret's voice through it. He's here. Daniel straightened. Send him in, he said. The door opened. Marcus Webb was exactly as Daniel remembered him from the handful of times they'd been in the same room fit. Confident, the kind of man whose handshake announced his intentions before his words did. He was carrying a tablet, and he was moving with the directed energy of someone who had come up here to resolve a specific operational irregularity and had no expectation that the resolution would take more than 10 minutes. He saw Daniel and stopped. Not a visible stop, a contained stop. The kind that happened only in the eyes, a fast recalibration. A rapid reassessment of the room's geography, completed in under 2 seconds. Mr. Whitmore. Smooth, immediate. Marcus, Daniel said. Sit down. Marcus sat. He set the tablet face down on the edge of the desk, a gesture that said he was here to talk, not to display data. And Daniel noticed it and filed it. You accessed the visitor logs, Marcus said. He looked at Richard, then at Daniel. His voice was conversational, controlled. Is there a specific concern I can address? Yes, as Daniel said. Marcus waited. Tell me about the visitor experience protocol, Daniel said. Your version, not the official one. The working version. A pause. Brief. Calibrated. Our priority is efficient visitor management, Marcus said. Getting people to their destinations quickly. Maintaining lobby throughput. Minimizing wait times. Minimizing wait times, Daniel repeated. Yes. Yesterday, Daniel said. A visitor waited in the lobby of this building for 8 hours. Marcus's face did not change. 8 hours, Daniel said again. 3 messages sent to an executive office. 1 phone call. 0 follow-ups escalation. 0 check-ins on the visitor's status. A security manager notified to consider asking the visitor to leave. Marcus said, I wasn't aware of that specific incident. I know, Daniel said, because there's no system that would have brought it to you. There's no escalation path. There's no reporting structure that flags an extended wait as a failure, rather than a statistic. He leaned forward. I was that visitor. Marcus, the room held. Marcus looked at him. For 3 full seconds. Marcus Webb was entirely still. Then he said, I see. 2 words, spoken the way a man speaks when he is running 4 calculations simultaneously, and none of them are coming out well. The visitor logs I had Margaret pull this morning, Daniel said, show 8 instances in the past 6 months of visitors waiting over 90 minutes with no documented follow-up. 3 waiting over 3 hours. And 1 woman, a job applicant, who waited 2 hours and 40 minutes and left without being seen and then sent an email that was never answered. He watched Marcus. I also have documentation, Daniel said, of 3 formal complaints filed by employees on the operational floors about being pressured to prioritize throughput over experience. Those complaints were reviewed and dismissed by a committee you sit on. Marcus was very still. I want to understand something, Daniel said. I want to understand how a man as operationally precise as you are did not notice that the efficiency he was building was creating a machine that processed people rather than served them. I want to understand whether you didn't notice, or noticed and chose not to address it, or addressed it in a way that served your metrics without serving the people your metrics were supposed to represent. Marcus opened his mouth. Think carefully, Daniel said. Not threateningly, not with anger. With the focused attention of a man who needed a true answer more than he needed a smooth one, because what you say in the next 2 minutes is going to determine what happens next. Marcus looked at the desk. For a long moment, he said nothing, and that silence was, in its own way, the answer. Not the answer of a villain, not the answer of a man who had come to work every day intending harm. The answer of a man who had built a machine and fallen in love with how the machine ran and stopped asking what the machine was for. I optimized for what was being measured, Marcus said finally. His voice was quieter than it had been, stripped of the directional confidence it usually carried. That's what I know how to do. And nobody told me the things that weren't being measured mattered as much as the things that were. They did matter, Daniel said. I know that now. They mattered then too, Daniel said. You just didn't have a number for them. Marcus looked at him. That's right, he said. I didn't have a number for them. Daniel sat back. He thought about his father at the end of a long day. Dirt under his fingernails, cheerful in a way that had nothing to do with how easy the day had been. His father had never had a number for anything. He had run his business entirely on the basic human principle that people deserved to be treated well to be treating them well, and that well came back to you eventually, in ways you could not predict and should not need to. Daniel had built this company on a version of that principle. Somewhere in 22 years of growth, the principle had gotten buried under the systems designed to protect it. Here is what's going to happen, Daniel said. He looked at Marcus, then at Richard, then, for a moment, at the folder Margaret had handed him in the hallway, the visitor logs with their yellow highlights, their silent record of people who had waited and hoped and been processed and forgotten. I'm bringing in an independent audit. I am personally calling Patricia Simmons. I am establishing a direct review line that bypasses the internal committee structure for any complaint involving operational culture or visitor treatment. And the 3 employees whose complaints were dismissed are going to receive a personal response from this office by the end of the week. He paused. Marcus, you're going to cooperate fully with the audit. Every metric, every protocol, Every internal guidance document your team has issued in the past 2 years. All of it. Marcus nodded. And then Daniel said, "We're going to figure out together what this company is actually for. Not what the quarterly report says it's for. What it's actually for." He stood. Both men across from him stood instinctively. The automatic response to a person of authority rising. And then both of them seemed to notice they had done it, and neither of them moved. Daniel picked up the folder. "The woman from HR," he said, "the one who dropped the folders yesterday. The one who offered me water. What's her name?" Richard looked uncertain. He glanced at Marcus. "I don't know," Richard said. Daniel looked at him steadily. "Find out," he said. "I'd like to thank her." He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on it, turned back once. 22 years ago, he said, "I hired the first person who ever worked for this company. He was 34, and he had just been laid off, and he was nervous, and he arrived 20 minutes early and sat in my hallway without complaint and waited. I hired him because of how he waited, because of the dignity in it." He looked at both of them. That man's dignity deserved a system worthy of it. So does everyone who sits in that lobby. He pushed the door open. Margaret was waiting on the other side. "Patricia Simmons," he said. "Already found her," Margaret said. He stopped. "Her email is in your inbox," Margaret said. "Draft is ready. I left the last paragraph blank. I thought you should write that part yourself." He looked at her. 19 years, thank you," he said. He went into his office, sat down and opened the email. He stared at the blank paragraph for a moment. Then he began to write. The email to Patricia Simmons took Daniel 40 minutes to write. Not because he didn't know what to say. He knew exactly what to say. It was the last paragraph, the one Margaret had left blank. The one that was supposed to be his, that kept stopping him. Because every version he started felt like either too much or not enough. Either the formal language of institutional apology, which was true but insufficient, or something so personal it crossed a line he hadn't yet located. He deleted 4 drafts. Then he stopped trying to write the right thing and started writing the true thing. He wrote, "I don't know what it cost you to drive to that building and wait 2 hours and 40 minutes and leave without being seen. I don't know what you were hoping for, or what that day meant inside the larger story of your life. But I know it mattered. It mattered because you came, because you sent the email, because you tried to tell someone what happened and nobody answered. This letter is the answer you deserved 4 months ago. I am sorry it took this long. And I am sorry for the reason it required." He read it once. Then he signed his name, Daniel Whitmore, Chairman, Whitmore Horizon Technologies, and sent it before he could revise it into something safer. He sat back in his chair. The building was fully awake around him now. He could feel it in the floor, in the particular hum of the ventilation system, in the distant sounds of 400 people doing the work that kept this company alive. 400 people who, right now, had no idea what was coming. No idea that the man who had sat in the lobby chair yesterday had come back this morning and begun pulling on a thread that was going to unravel things all the way down to the foundation. Margaret knocked and came in without waiting for an answer, which she only did when something genuinely needed immediate attention. "The audit firm is available to start next Monday," she said. "I've already contacted 3 firms. Meridian Group has the strongest track record in culture assessment. I sent you their last 2 reports." "Meridian," Daniel said without looking up. "Book them." Done. She didn't move. He looked up. "There's something else," she said. He waited. "Chloe Bennett called my extension 20 minutes ago," Margaret said. "She asked if she could speak with you." Daniel looked at her. What did she say she wanted? She said she'd been thinking all night. She said she had something to tell you that she didn't say yesterday, she said. Margaret paused. The pause of someone choosing words carefully. She said she thinks she knows who sent the anonymous messages. The room was completely still. Daniel straightened. "Send her up," he said. Margaret left. He stood and walked to the window. Looked down at the street below. People moving. The ordinary, anonymous, continuous motion of a city mourning people who didn't know each other. didn't see each other, moved past each other with the practiced blindness of people in close proximity who had learned not to connect. He thought about the person who had written those messages, the care in them, the specificity, the choice to route around every internal channel because none of them felt safe. That person had believed, against the weight of 8 months of silence on every internal complaint they'd watched disappear, that somewhere above the system there was someone who would listen. They had reached out with their bare hands through the public contact form on the company website and trusted that someone on the other side would catch it. He had caught it. He was standing at the window thinking about what that trust cost and what it required of him when Chloe knocked. "Come in," he said. She came in the way people enter spaces that feel larger than the context they're used to, carefully, with her weight forward slightly, as if prepared to stop. She was in her work clothes. She looked like she had also not slept particularly well. There was something stripped down about her face today, without the professional calibration she had worn at the reception desk. She looked younger, also more real. "Sit down," Daniel said. He came away from the window and sat across from her. Not behind the desk, but in the chair beside it. The posture of a conversation rather than a meeting. She sat. "You said you know who sent the messages," he said. Chloe folded her hands in her lap. "I think so," she said. "I'm not 100%. But yes, I think so." "Tell me." She looked at him. "Before I do," she said, "I need you to know something. This person, whoever it was, they did this because they believed it mattered. They believed someone would actually listen. And I think they were scared. I think they sent those messages, wondering if it would change anything, or if it would just disappear the way everything else disappeared." "I know," Daniel said. "I just need to know," Chloe said. "That telling you this isn't going to hurt them." Daniel looked at her directly. "I will not use this information to identify or expose anyone," he said. "I will not take any action that puts the person at risk. I am telling you that plainly, and I mean it completely." Chloe nodded, slowly, deciding. "Her name is Renata Cruz," she said. "She works on the 3rd floor. Operations support. She's been here 4 years." She paused. "She's one of the 3 people who filed the internal complaints." Daniel was very still. "Her complaint was the first one," Chloe said. "About 8 months ago. She documented everything, specific interactions, specific guidance from Greg Ferris about prioritizing speed over experience, specific dates. She submitted it through HR. 2 weeks later, she was told the complaint had been reviewed and no action was being taken. She filed a second one. Same result. The 3rd time she tried to file, the form wouldn't accept her employee ID. Daniel's jaw tightened. "The form wouldn't accept her ID," he repeated. "The system showed an error," Chloe said. "She tried 3 times on 3 different days. She reported the technical issue to IT. It said there was no record of an error." She stopped. "She told me all of this about a month ago. We've known each other since she started." She was exhausted. She kept saying, "I don't know if anyone up there even knows this is happening. I don't know if it reaches anybody." Daniel said nothing. "So she found another way," Chloe said. "She used the public contact form. Different email addresses. She was careful because she was scared. And she waited. And she didn't hear anything for 3 weeks. And then yesterday she texted me and said, 'There's a man in the lobby who's been there since morning, and nobody's doing anything, and it feels exactly like what I've been describing for 8 months.'" Chloe looked at him. "She texted you," Daniel said. "Yes. While you were at the reception desk." Chloe's face shifted, the discomfort of the honest answer moving through it. "Yes," she said. Daniel absorbed that. "Let it settle. And you read the text," he said. "Yes. And then you looked at me," he said, "and made the same assessment you had made that morning." Chloe didn't look away. "Yes," she said. They sat with that for a moment. Daniel thought about Renata Cruz on the 3rd floor. A woman who had tried every legitimate path and been turned away from each one, including a complaint form that mysteriously stopped accepting her employee ID after her 2nd submission. A woman who had reached through the only gap she could find and waited 3 weeks to find out if anyone heard her. A woman who had watched from 3 floors up as the man she'd alerted the building to go help sit in the lobby for 8 hours while the text went unanswered. "I want to meet her," Daniel said. Chloe looked startled. "Now? If she's willing," he said. "I'm not going to call her to my office. I'll go to her. 3rd floor. Chloe stared at him for a moment. "I'll text her," she said. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved. A pause. Then the small vibration of a reply. Chloe looked at the screen. Something crossed her face. "What does she say?" Daniel asked. Chloe turned the phone so he could see it. The message said, "Is this actually real? Is this actually happening?" Daniel leaned forward and typed the reply himself. His thumb on the screen of Chloe's phone. "Yes, it is real. Give me 10 minutes. He handed the phone back. Chloe looked at him. "She's going to cry," Chloe said. "Probably," Daniel said. He stood up. "Let's go." They took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Margaret watched them go from her desk without expression, which was how she expressed everything that mattered. The 3rd floor was the operational core of the building, the floor where the support infrastructure lived, the people who kept the company's logistics running, the invisible middle that held the visible top in place. It was louder than the executive floor. More crowded. The energy different, more kinetic, more immediate, the particular busy texture of people managing 100 small things simultaneously. Daniel walked with Chloe through the floor. People noticed him, not because they knew who he was, but because he was moving with Chloe, and Chloe didn't usually bring people up here, and because something in the quality of their movement purposeful, direct, unannounced, made people look up. Renata Cruz was at her desk in the middle of the floor. She was 37. With dark hair pulled back and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and a coffee mug that said "most paid person" in block letters that had the quality of a joke told so many times it had become a small, private grief. She was looking at her computer screen with the particular focus of someone who is using concentration as a shield against something they're not sure is coming. Chloe stopped 3 feet from her desk. Renata looked up. She looked at Chloe, then at Daniel. Then at Daniel again. In the way people look at someone they weren't expecting, in a place they weren't expecting them. Reassembling the picture. "Hi," she said. Her voice was steady. She was making it steady. "Hi," Daniel said. He pulled a chair from an empty desk nearby, turned it, and sat down directly across from her at eye level, not above, not at a distance. Renata watched him do this. "I read your messages," he said. She looked at him.
"All 3 of them," he said. "I read the first one 3 times.
The 3rd one 5 times. The 3rd one was different from the first 2, more specific, more detailed. You'd had more time to think about it, or you'd decided to commit to it more fully." Renata said. "Very quietly, I decided to commit." "I know," he said. "It takes a particular kind of courage to commit to something when you've already tried 3 times through proper channels and been turned away every time." He paused. "And when the form stops accepting your employee ID on the 3rd attempt." Something moved through Renata's face. A complicated movement. The kind that happens when a person has been carrying something they expected to keep carrying indefinitely, and someone suddenly says, "I see it. I see the weight of it." She took off her glasses, put them on the desk, pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. "I thought it was a system glitch," she said. Her voice was controlled but thin at the edges. "And then I thought, no. I know what a system glitch looks like. I've been working in operational support for 4 years. I know what an error message looks like, and I know what a block looks like, and that was a block." She stopped. "I couldn't prove it. There was no way to prove it. So I just
stopped trying the form
and found another way," Daniels said. "I wasn't going to let it go," she said. "I couldn't let it go. Because it wasn't just me. I watched it happen to other people. I watched visitors come in and get sorted like mail, like packages that get routed based on the label on the outside. And the people doing the sorting weren't cruel. They were just following the signals they'd been given. Speed, volume, move it through, keep the metrics clean." She picked up the coffee mug and put it back down without drinking from it. Nobody told them to be unkind. Nobody told them to be kind either. And when nobody tells you, You default to what gets measured. I know, Daniel said. And I tried to tell someone, she said. I really tried. She looked at him directly, with the particular rawness of someone who has been carrying an injustice carefully for so long that setting it down even slightly makes the weight suddenly visible. And I kept wondering if anyone at the top actually knew. If you knew. Because I couldn't believe that you built this company and you knew what was happening and did nothing. I needed to believe there was someone who would care if they knew. The floor around them had gone quiet in the particular way that floors go quiet when something real is happening in the middle of them. People not staring, but not listening either. The ambient awareness of a shared space that had tilted toward something significant. Daniel looked at her. I didn't know, he said. And that is my failure. Not yours, not the failure of the people who tried to file complaints. Mine. Because I built a company and then trusted the systems to carry the values without staying close enough to verify that they did. I handed the wheel and watched the speedometer without checking where we were going. He leaned forward slightly. Renata, your complaint form was blocked. I don't know yet whether that was deliberate or procedural, but I'm going to find out, and the people who reviewed your complaints and dismissed them are going to account for that. Not in a punitive way designed to make me feel better about the situation. In a real way, a structural way that makes sure it can't happen to the next person. Renata was looking at him very carefully. The 3 complaints, she said. I know about all 3, he said. Greg Ferris told 2 of us directly, she said. He said, and these are his actual words, he said. If your experience metrics don't improve, your position metrics will reflect it. He said it in a team meeting, in front of 8 people. Daniel absorbed this. That was not a cultural drift. That was not an unintended consequence of operational efficiency. That was instruction. Direct, deliberate instruction to prioritize throughput over human experience. Delivered in front of witnesses. Who were the 8 people? He said. I have their names, Renata said. I wrote them down that night. I have the date and the approximate time, and a summary of the exact language. She opened her desk drawer and took out a folded piece of paper. She held it for a moment without extending it. I've been carrying this for 4 months, waiting to find out if it would ever matter. It matters, Daniel said. She handed him the paper. He took it, looked at it, folded it once, and put it in his jacket pocket. I'm going to ask you to be willing to speak with the independent audit firm that begins next Monday, he said. Not to testify against anyone. Not to put yourself at any risk. But because your account is one of the clearest and most documented accounts of the culture I've asked them to examine. And they need to hear it from someone who lived it. Renata looked at him. Will it be safe? She said. I'm going to make it safe, he said. And I'm going to tell you something else. You asked, in your messages, whether anyone at the top knew. You reached through the one gap you could find because you needed to believe someone would listen. He paused. I am going to make sure that gap doesn't need to exist anymore. That the path from a problem to the person with the power to fix it is clear and protected, and never again depends on someone being brave enough to find a way around every barrier the system puts up. Renata put her hands flat on her desk. She pressed them down, the gesture of someone grounding themselves. Then she said, there are 2 other people, on this floor, who saw the same things, who tried to say something and were told it didn't reach anyone. They stopped talking about it, but they didn't stop knowing. I'd like to meet them, Daniel said. Today, here, on this floor, not in my office, if they're willing. Renata looked at him for a long moment. Then she pushed her chair back and stood up. Give me 5 minutes, she said. She walked across the floor. Daniel sat and watched her go. Around him, the 3rd floor continued its morning keyboards and low conversations and the ordinary machinery of work, but it was a different ordinary now. Something had shifted. He could feel it. The way you feel a change in air pressure before rain. People were looking at him now. Not sideways. Not in the ambient half-attention way of people in the same room. Looking at him. Trying to understand what they were seeing. A man in his 50s, in a gray button-down and a fleece jacket, sitting at a desk on the third floor with his hands folded. Waiting. The same posture he had held in the lobby for 9 hours. Chloe was standing near the elevator with her hands clasped. Watching. She had said almost nothing since they arrived on the floor. But Daniel could see in her face that something was happening to her, something quiet and internal. A reorganization of the way she understood where she stood inside the larger story of this place. Renata came back with 2 people. A man in his early 30s named Deshawn, who had the compact, careful energy of someone who had been paying very close attention for a very long time, and had learned to keep what he observed largely to himself. And a woman named Janet, mid-40s, who walked with a slight limp, and had the face of someone who had decided years ago to be direct, and had paid for it enough times to know the cost precisely. They stopped in front of Daniel. "You're him," Deshawn said, not accusatorially. "Just verifying." "Yes," Daniel said. Deshawn nodded slowly. He looked at the desk, then at Daniel. "I filed a complaint 14 months ago," he said. "Before Renata. I was the first. I reported that visitors to the third-floor support desk were being redirected to lower priority queues if they didn't present a certain way. If they were confused, if they were elderly, if they spoke with an accent." He paused. "The complaint was dismissed in 11 days. I got a form email." 11 days, Daniel said. 11 days to tell me the thing I watched happen. Every day wasn't happening, Deshawn said. "I stopped filing after that. But I didn't stop watching," Janet said. "I reported Greg Ferris by name. 6 months ago. I documented specific dates and specific language." She looked at Daniel without blinking. "I was called into a meeting 2 weeks later with an HR representative, who told me the review had found no evidence of the conduct I described. Then I was moved to a different team. They called it a realignment." She said the word, the way you'd say a word in a language you find fraudulent. "My new team is 12 feet from my old desk. Same work. Different reporting line. Different performance evaluator." "Who is your new evaluator?" Daniel asked. Janet looked at him steadily. "Greg Ferris's direct supervisor," she said. The floor was very quiet. Daniel looked at Deshawn, at Janet, at Renata standing slightly behind them, watching him. 3 people, on one floor, who had tried to use the system. 14 months of documented attempts to tell the truth through legitimate channels. Answered with form emails and dismissals and a team realignment that put the person who complained under the authority of the person she'd complained about. "Janet," Daniel said, "I want you to know something. What was done to you, the realignment, was retaliation. I'm going to call it that plainly. I don't have all the documentation yet, but I know enough to say it clearly." Janet's chin lifted slightly. A small, involuntary movement. "Nobody's ever said that to me directly," she said. "I'm saying it," Daniel said, "and I'm going to say it in writing. And you are going to be moved back to your original team under an independent reporting line by end of day today." Janet's eyes went sharp. Not with gratitude, with the scrutiny of someone who had been promised things before and knew the difference between a promise and an intention. "Today," she said. "Today," Daniel said. He took out his phone and called Margaret. She answered on the first ring. "Janet," he turned to her. "Last name, Okafor," she said. "Janet Okafor. Third-floor operations support," Daniel said into the phone. "I want her team assignment and reporting line changed by noon today. Independent reporting line directly to HR audit. Not through web structure. This is not a request." A pause on the line. "Done," Margaret said. He hung up. He looked at the 3 of them. "Monday. The Meridian Group begins a full cultural audit of this company," he said. "All 3 of you are going to be asked to participate. I am personally guaranteeing that your participation is protected. Not by policy, by the direct intervention of this office if anything attempts to move against you." Deshawn looked at him. "What happens to Greg Ferris?" he said. Daniel looked at him steadily. "That depends on what the audit finds," he said. "But I want to tell you something about how I'm going to approach what the audit finds. The goal is not punishment. The goal is understanding how this happened and making sure it cannot happen again." That means some things will need to be restructured, and some people will need to be moved, and some situations will need to be named clearly and addressed fully. He paused. I am not going to promise you that everyone who made a wrong choice in this situation will lose their job. I am going to promise you that every wrong choice that has been made is going to be acknowledged. And that acknowledged means seen, named, and addressed. Deshawn nodded, slowly. Then, more definitively. That's more than I expected, he said. I know, Daniel said. I'm sorry to talk this long. To be worth expecting. He stood up. He looked at the three of them, Renata, who had found the gap and reached through it. Deshawn, who had been first and paid the cost of being first. Janet, who had been realigned and kept going anyway. He thought about his father. Dirt under the fingernails. Cheerful in a way that had nothing to do with how easy the day was. He thought, these are my father's people. These are the people who come every day and do the work, and try to do it right and need the place they do it to believe they matter. Thank you, he said to all three of them. For trying. For not stopping. For finding a way to reach someone. He turned to go. Then Renata said, Mr. Whitmore. He stopped. That chair, she said. The one you sat in yesterday, in the lobby. He looked at her. Don't let them put it in a museum or something, she said. Don't make it a symbol. Keep it in the lobby. Keep it exactly where it was. Just leave it there. So the next person who sits in it knows they're sitting somewhere that was noticed. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. He thought about Lily, asking him why he worked so hard. He thought about what he had told her. He thought, yes, that is exactly right. Deal, he said. He walked to the elevator. Chloe fell in beside him. Neither of them spoke until the doors closed. Then Chloe said, quietly, I could have done something yesterday. Yes, Daniel said. I should have called directly. I should have escalated. I should have gone upstairs myself. Yes, he said again. She looked at him. Why aren't you angrier at me? She said. He thought about it. The honest answer. Because anger at you specifically doesn't fix what built you, he said. The culture trained your instincts. The accountability for that goes a long way above you. What I need from you isn't remorse. It's the willingness to be different tomorrow than you were yesterday. She looked at the elevator doors. I can do that, she said. The doors opened on the executive floor. Daniel stepped out. He had 4 messages from Richard. 2 from the board's legal liaison, and 1 from an unknown number that turned out to be a journalist who had somehow heard something was happening at Whitmore Horizon, and wanted a comment. He was not surprised. He was also not ready. But then he thought about Renata's face when he'd said, I read your messages. He thought about Janet's chin lifting when he said, that was retaliation. He thought about Deshawn saying, that's more than I expected. He thought, ready is not the point. Willing is the point. He walked to his office. He sat down. He picked up the phone and called the board's legal liaison first, because what was coming next was going to require the board. And the board was going to require preparation. And that preparation was going to require honesty about things that did not reflect well on this company or its chairman. He was prepared for that. He had been the man in the chair. He knew what it felt like to be invisible. He was not going to be the kind of man who forgot. The board call happened at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Daniel sat at his desk with the phone on speaker and Margaret in the room. Because Margaret had been in every difficult conversation this company had ever had, and he was not about to change that now. There were 7 board members. 4 of them had been with the company for over a decade. 2 were newer, brought in during the last expansion cycle. One Arthur Greer, the eldest, 73 years old, who had known Daniel since before the company existed, said almost nothing during the entire call, and that silence carried more weight than everything else combined. Daniel told them everything. He did not frame it, he did not position it. He told them the plain sequence of events, the anonymous messages, the decision to visit his own building unannounced, the 9 hours in the lobby, Richard's admission, Marcus Webb's metrics culture, Greg Ferris's direct instruction to staff, the 3 blocked complaints, Janet Okafor's retaliatory realignment, the complaint form that stopped accepting Renata Cruz's employee ID after her second submission. He told them all of it. When he finished, the silence on the call lasted 11 seconds, he counted. Then, a board member named Sandra Cho, who ran her own firm and had joined the board 2 years ago, and had the particular precision of someone who thought in outcomes rather than impressions, said Daniel. What's your read on whether the complaint form block was deliberate? My read is yes, he said. I don't have the technical documentation yet, but the pattern is too consistent to be procedural. That's potential whistleblower retaliation exposure, Sandra said. I know, he said. Legal is going to want to get ahead of this, she said. Legal is already on it, he said. I called them before this meeting. Another silence. Then Arthur Greer's voice came through the speaker. Quiet, unhurried, with the weight of someone who chose words the way a carpenter chose joints, because they needed to hold. Daniel, Arthur said. I have one question. Go ahead. Arthur. When you sat in that lobby for 9 hours, Arthur said, at what point did you know it was this bad? Daniel thought about it. The honest answer. About noon, he said. When I watched the HR director walk out of a 2-hour meeting about employee culture and walk past me without seeing me. Arthur was quiet. And you stayed another 5 hours, Arthur said. I needed to know how deep it went, Daniel said. Another pause. The audit is the right move, Arthur said. The Okafor correction was the right move. The Cruz outreach was the right move. What's your plan for the board? I need the board authorize full independent access for Meridian, Daniel said. No restricted floors. No communications filtered through legal before the auditors see them. No managed access. Full scope, Sandra said. That's going to make some people uncomfortable. Good, Daniel said, a beat. Then Sandra said, I'll second the authorization. All in favor, Arthur said. It was unanimous. The call ended. Daniel sat for a moment in the quiet of his office. Margaret stood near the door. Outside the office, the floor hummed along in its afternoon rhythm. Indifferent and continuous. The journalist called again, Margaret said. Which outlet? She told him. He thought about it. Not yet, he said. When the audit has findings. Not before. And Greg Ferris? She said. Daniel looked at his hands. Greg Ferris was 51 years old. He had been with the company for 6 years. He had a performance record that, on paper, was strong. He had done something that Daniel had no intention of minimizing. He had stood in front of 8 people and told them their worth would be measured in speed rather than care. And then, when 3 of those people tried to say so, through the channels designed for exactly that purpose, he had been positioned at the center of the system that dismissed them. Richard is meeting with him this afternoon, Daniel said. I want it documented. I want his specific responses on record. And I want HR independent of Marcus Webb's committee in the room. Already arranged, Margaret said. Of course it was. What about Marcus? She said. This one was harder. Marcus Webb was not Greg Ferris. Marcus had not stood in front of 8 people and told them their humanity didn't count toward their metrics. Marcus had built a machine and optimized it and stopped asking what the machine was for. That was a different kind of failure, quieter, more systemic, more complicit in the way that institutions, rather than individuals, are complicit. Harder to assign, harder to resolve, harder to look at because it reflected something not just about Marcus, but about the entire structure Daniel had handed him. Marcus stays, Daniel said. With conditions, he cooperates fully with the audit. He submits to a full review of every protocol his team has implemented in the past 2 years. And he rebuilds his metrics from the ground up with Meridian's guidance, new measurements. New weights, human experience scored at the same level as operational efficiency. Margaret raised an eyebrow slightly. You trust him to do that? She said. I trust him to do what he's built for, Daniel said. Which is build things. I'm changing what he's been told to build. Margaret considered this, then nodded. Once, the nod of someone who reserves judgment but accepts the reasoning, she left. Daniel pulled out the piece of paper Renata had handed him on the 3rd floor. The folded paper with the 8 names on it, and the date, and the summary of what Greg Ferris had said in that team meeting 4 months ago. He read it again. Then he put it in the folder that was going to Meridian on Monday. He looked at the clock. 3:42. Lily got out of school at 3:15. She was at aftercare until 5. He had exactly 1 hour and 18 minutes. He picked up the phone and called Patricia Simmons. She answered on the 4th ring, with the cautious, slightly formal voice of someone answering an unknown number who has decided not to assume the worst, but is prepared for it. "Hello, Miss Simmons," Daniel said. "This is Daniel Whitmore. I sent you an email this morning." A pause. "Yes," she said, "I read it." Her voice changed, careful still, but a different kind of careful. The kind that comes from not wanting to feel something too quickly before you know it's real. "I wanted to call," Daniel said, "because an email felt insufficient. What I wrote is true. Everything in it is true, but I wanted you to hear it said rather than just read it." She was quiet. "You came to our building 4 months ago," he said. "You waited 2 hours and 40 minutes. You were never seen. You sent an email and nobody answered. That is a complete failure on the part of this company, and there is no version of it that is acceptable, and I am not going to offer you an explanation designed to make it more acceptable." A longer pause. Then Patricia Simmons said, in a voice that was controlled, in the way that voices are controlled when the person speaking is deciding, in real time, whether to let the thing underneath it out. "I drove 45 minutes to that interview, I know," Daniel said. "I took the day off work," she said. "I used personal time. I know. And I sat there for almost 3 hours," she said. "And nobody came. And I kept thinking maybe I have the wrong floor. Maybe I have the wrong time. Maybe I filled out the form wrong. I kept checking my email on my phone, thinking maybe there was a message I'd missed. I kept trying to find the thing I'd done wrong." Her voice was steady, but the steadiness had cost her something. "And then eventually I left. And I drove 45 minutes home and I called my sister. And I told her I didn't get the job." "You did not get the job," Daniel said. "You were never given the interview." Silence. "That matters," he said. "The distinction matters. You did nothing wrong. The system failed you completely and specifically, and at every point where it had an opportunity to do better." Patricia Simmons said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Why are you calling me?" It was a real question. Genuine. Without accusation. The question of someone who had learned to ask why before they allowed themselves to believe. "Because you deserved a response 4 months ago, and you didn't get one," Daniel said. "And because I needed you to know that the thing you experienced was real, and it was wrong and it's being addressed. Not with a press release. With actual structural change." A pause. "And," he said, "I'd like to know if you're still interested in a position with this company." The silence. This time was different. Longer. "You're serious," she said. "The engineering team has 2 senior developer openings," he said. "Both were posted last month. I can arrange for you to speak with the head of engineering, directly, not a scheduled lobby appointment. A direct conversation, and if the role is a fit, we proceed from there. If it's not a fit, or if you've moved on and have no interest, I understand that completely, and I respect it." Patricia Simmons breathed in audibly. "I need to think about that," she said. "Of course," he said. "I need to think about whether I want to work somewhere that." She stopped. Started again. "I need to think about whether what you're describing is real, or whether it's a gesture." "That's a reasonable thing to need to think about," Daniel said. "Take whatever time you need. If you decide you want the conversation, you have my direct number now. Call it."
It comes to me.
A pause.
Does it actually come to you?
She said. "Yes," he said. "Most CEOs say that," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm telling you to test it. Call on a Thursday evening, or a Saturday morning. If Margaret answers, she'll tell me immediately. If I answer, you'll know." Patricia was quiet. Then, very quietly, she said, "Okay, one word, but in it, the beginning of something." "Thank you for answering," Daniel said. "Both just now and 4 months ago, when you sent the email. It took something to send that email. It took a lot," she said. "I know," he said. "Thank you for sending it anyway." He hung up. He sat for a moment with the phone in his hand, looking at the middle distance. Then he put the phone down, stood up, got his backpack, and went to pick up his daughter. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of Daniel's professional life since the first year the company almost didn't survive. The Meridian Group arrived Monday as scheduled. 8 auditors, full access. No filtered communications. They moved through the building floor by floor with the systematic thoroughness of people who had done this before and understood that what they were looking for was not dramatic evidence of intentional cruelty, but the quieter, more pervasive evidence of a culture that had drifted from its values so gradually that nobody had noticed the distance until someone measured it. They found what Daniel had expected, and things he hadn't. The complaint form issue was deliberate. Not a system glitch. Not an administrative error. Someone with administrator access to the HR portal had added Renata Cruz's employee ID to a flagged list that caused automatic error responses. Meridian's tech auditors traced the access log to a specific workstation. The workstation belonged to Greg Ferris. Daniel was in his office when Margaret brought him that finding. He read it twice, set it down, looked out the window for a long moment. Then he said, "Get Richard." Richard came in 5 minutes later, and Daniel handed him the finding without a word. Richard read it. His jaw tightened. "Greg needs to be removed immediately," Richard said. "Yes," Daniel said. "With legal present," Richard said. "Already arranged," Daniel said. "This afternoon, I want HR independent counsel in the room. I want his responses documented, and I want security notified that his access ends at the close of that meeting." Richard nodded. Then he said, "Daniel, I want to say something." Daniel looked at him. "When I told you I was comfortable," Richard said, "that morning in your office, I want you to know that wasn't me trying to give you the answer I thought you wanted. That was the truest thing I've said in this building in a long time." He paused. "I got comfortable with numbers that looked good, and I stopped asking what the numbers were covering. And I need you to know that I understand what that cost." Daniel looked at him steadily. "I know you do," he said. "That's why you're still here." Richard nodded. Left. Greg Ferris was walked out of the building at 4:15 that afternoon. No drama, no public announcement. The quiet, contained finality of a door being properly closed. 3 of his direct team members requested meetings with HR within 24 hours. All 3 of them had information they had been holding, not because they agreed with what they had witnessed, but because they hadn't believed the system was safe enough to receive it. Now it was. Meridian's full report came in on day 31. Daniel read it alone, at his kitchen table after Lily was in bed. He read all 94 pages. He made notes in the margins in blue pen, the same color he used for Lily's lunchbox notes. He sat with it for 2 hours. The report confirmed what he had seen and named what he hadn't. It documented 16 specific instances of visitor mismanagement over the past 18 months. It identified a structural gap between the company's stated values and its operational incentive structure, specifically that no metric in the entire performance evaluation system referenced human experience, visitor dignity, or the quality of interpersonal care. It found that 3 of the 5 HR committee members who had reviewed internal complaints in the past year had structural conflicts of interest through reporting relationships with the subjects of those complaints. And it found something that Daniel had not expected. The one person who had offered him water on that long day in the lobby, the HR coordinator, who had picked up her scattered folders and asked if he wanted something from the break room. Her name was Amara Williams. She was 26 years old. She had been with the company for 11 months, and she had submitted her resignation 2 weeks before Daniel's visit to the building because she had filed an internal complaint, not about visitor treatment, but about being told by her supervisor to stop taking extra time with distressed visitors because it was affecting her throughput numbers, and the complaint had been dismissed in 9 days. Her resignation was effective the week after Daniel's lobby visit. She had already left. Daniel set the report down. He sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of the house, and he felt something move through him that was not quite grief and not quite anger, and was perhaps the particular feeling that comes when you understand the full shape of a thing you were responsible for. One person, in 9 hours, one person had treated him like a human being, and the company had driven her out 2 weeks later for doing exactly that. He picked up his phone. He called Margaret. She answered on the second ring because it was Margaret, and Margaret answered on the second ring at 10:30 at night, same way she answered at 9 in the morning. Amara Williams, he said, former HR coordinator, resigned 3 weeks ago. I need her contact information and I need to call her tomorrow morning. A pause. Daniel, Margaret said, it's 10:30. I know, he said. I'll have her number on your desk by 7, she said. Thank you, he said. He hung up. He looked at the refrigerator with Lily's drawings on it, the purple lunchbox on the counter, the list in looping second-grade print. No pickles. No mustard. Extra apple, please, he thought. I built this company so that people like Amara Williams would have a place worth working. I have to rebuild it, so that's actually true. He called Amara Williams at 8 the next morning. She answered with the careful voice of someone who had recently left a job and was still recalibrating what normal felt like. When he told her who he was, she said nothing for 4 full seconds. Then she said, "How did you get this number?" "Margaret Collins," he said. "My assistant." "Why are you calling me?" "Because I read your resignation letter," he said, "and I read the complaint you filed before it. And I need you to know that the reason you left this company is a reason this company is ashamed of. And I would like to talk to you about whether there's a version of the future where you come back." Silence. "I left because I was told to stop caring," she said. "I was literally told to stop taking time with people who needed it because it made my numbers look slow." Her voice had the quality of something that had been sitting in a specific shape for weeks and was now being permitted to take its natural form. "I filed a complaint about it, and it went nowhere, and I decided I wasn't going to spend my career in a place that measured me by how quickly I could move human beings through a system." "You were right to decide that," Daniel said. "And you were wrong that it had to be there." A pause. "The company is changing," he said. "Not in a memo. Not in a mission statement revision. In the structure. New metrics. New complaint process. New accountability. The people who told you to stop caring are gone or being held accountable. And the person who drove out the best human interaction I witnessed in 9 hours in my own building is not someone I'm willing to lose to a mistake that I should have caught a long time ago." 9 hours, Amara said. "What do you mean?" 9 hours in your building? And so he told her. He told her the whole thing. The lobby, the backpack, the chair, the 8 hours of being invisible. The woman who dropped the folders and offered him water and treated him like a man sitting in a chair instead of an object occupying space. When he finished, Amara was quiet. Then she said very slowly, "That was you. That was me," he said. "I heard about a man who'd been in the lobby all day," she said, "from a friend who still works there. She texted me that night." She paused. "I didn't know it was you. You couldn't have," he said. "I quit because of a culture that made it impossible to do what I did for you that day," she said. "I quit because I was told that exact behavior stopping. Asking, making someone feel seen was slowing down my metrics." "I know," he said. "And that culture started because of decisions made above me," she said. "Yes," he said. "And above the people above you. And some of those decisions trace back to me." Amara was quiet. "What would coming back look like?" she said. "A new role," Daniel said. "Not her old one. A position on the culture audit implementation team working directly with Meridian on building the new visitor experience standards. Her instincts become the template. What she did naturally. Without training, without incentive, with no metric to measure it. That becomes the standard the whole building is trained toward." Amara breathed in. "That's not a small offer," she said. "No," he said. "It's not. I need a few days," she said. "Take them," he said. She called back in 2 days. She said yes. The company announcement went out company-wide 6 weeks after Daniel's day in the lobby. It was not written by the communications team. It was written by Daniel, at his kitchen table, with the same blue pen he used for everything. Margaret cleaned up the formatting. The substance did not change. It said, "6 weeks ago, I walked into this building as a visitor. I spent 9 hours in the lobby. I was not recognized as the owner of this company, and I want to be clear that this is not the point of the story. The point is what I watched happen around me during those 9 hours. The point is the culture I saw operating in the building that carries my name. I did not like what I saw. I did not recognize the company I built in the company I saw. And I take direct responsibility for the distance between those two things. It laid out the audit findings in plain language. No corporate softening. No managed framing. What was found. What it meant, what was being changed, and why. It named no individuals except Daniel himself. It ended. This company will be measured from now on by a standard that was demonstrated. Unremarkably, by one person on an ordinary Tuesday morning who stopped and asked a man in a chair if he needed a glass of water. That is the standard. Everything else we build has to be worthy of it. The response inside the building was not what Daniel expected. He had expected relief. He had expected some gratitude, some defensiveness, some of the complicated mixture that comes when an institution acknowledges publicly what people inside it have known privately. What he didn't expect was the email from Deshawn. It came 4 hours after the announcement. Short, direct, in the particular voice of a man who had learned to conserve words, because he'd spent years in a place where they didn't reach anyone. It said, "I've worked here for 6 years. This is the first time I've read something from the top of this company that sounded like it was written by a person. Thank you." Daniel read it 3 times. He wrote back, "Thank you for staying long enough to read it." 3 months later, the lobby of Whitmore Horizon Technologies looked exactly the same. Same high ceilings, same arc of reception desks, same elevator banks, same seating area. But the chair was still there. The same chair in the same position where Daniel had sat for 9 hours. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had put a plaque on it or turned it into a monument. It was just a chair in the waiting area where anyone who came through the front door and needed to sit could sit. And the people behind the reception desks greeted everyone who came through those doors, not because they had been told to. Not because it was on their performance evaluation, though now it was, but because Amara Williams had spent 3 months working with every person in that lobby space, telling them the one story that mattered, that every person who walks through that door is on their way somewhere that matters to them. You are the first face of this company they see. You are the thing they remember about whether this place deserved their trust. Chloe Bennett was one of the people Amara spent the most time with, not because Chloe needed the most work, but because Chloe had done something that mattered. She had stood in Daniel's office and told the truth when she didn't have to. And Amara believed that people who could tell the truth under pressure were exactly the people you built culture around. One afternoon, 3 months after the lobby day, Chloe was at the reception desk when a man came in. He was in his late 60s. He was wearing a worn jacket and carrying a canvas bag, and he moved with the slightly uncertain posture of someone who was not sure they were in the right place. Chloe looked up. She stood. "Good morning," she said. "Welcome to Whitmore Horizon. Can I help you find where you need to be?" The man stopped, looked at her. Something in his face shifted a small relaxation. The particular easing of a person who has been braced for friction and found. Instead, a door held open. "I have an appointment," he said. "I'm not sure I'm in the right." "Tell me your name," Chloe said, "and we'll find it together." She found his appointment in 40 seconds, called up to the relevant floor, offered him coffee while he waited, which he accepted, told him the elevator was on his left and the office he needed was the 3rd door on the right, wished him luck. He thanked her. She sat back down. She thought about the man in the gray button-down, sitting in the lobby chair all day. And she thought about what it had cost to see him, and what it had cost to not see him. And she thought about how those two costs compared. There was no comparison. That evening, Daniel picked up Lily from school. She climbed into the car with the backpack that was always half unzipped and the stuffed elephant Gerald, who had been everywhere she had ever been, and the expression of someone with a great deal to report. "Dad," she said, "I need to tell you something." "Tell me," he said. "At lunch today," she said, "there was a new kid. He was sitting by himself because he didn't know where to sit yet. and I went and sat with him. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. And, he said, and his name is Marcus, and he likes dinosaurs, and he knows a lot of facts about the Cretaceous period, she said. Some of them I think might not be exactly accurate, but I didn't say that because it seemed rude. Daniel smiled. That was very thoughtful of you, he said. He seemed relieved, she said. When I sat down, she made a small exhaling gesture with her body. The deflation of someone releasing held tension. He kind of went like that. Yeah, Daniel said. Was that the right thing to do? She asked. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was looking at him with the complete, unguarded seriousness that 8-year-olds deploy when they are asking something they actually need to know, not something they're asking to be praised for. Yes, he said. That was exactly the right thing to do. She nodded, satisfied, turned to look out the window at the city passing by. Daniel drove. He thought about a chair in a lobby. He thought about 9 hours and 1 glass of water. He thought about Renata's hands pressed flat on the desk and Janet's chin lifting and Deshawn's voice saying, "That's more than I expected." He thought about Patricia Simmons driving 45 minutes and checking her email on her phone, thinking she must have filled out the form wrong. He thought about Amara Williams being told to stop caring because it was slowing down the numbers. He thought about his father at the end of the day, cheerful in the way of someone who had decided to be okay with what the day asked of him. He thought about Eleanor on their 3rd date, telling him she cared about the fact that he knew how to listen, that he was paying attention. He drove his daughter home through the city where his company stood, 12 stories high with his name on the outside and the beginning of something better on the inside. He was a single father with an old backpack and a bad left knee and a daughter who sat next to strangers at lunch because they looked like they needed it. He had built something that had forgotten what it was for. He had walked back in and reminded it. And he was not finished. He would never be finished. Because a company, like a person, like a family, like anything worth building, is not a thing you complete, it is a thing you tend. Every day. With the same steady hands you'd use to pack a sandwich and cut it on the diagonal, because triangles taste better than rectangles. And write a note in blue pen that says, "Today is going to be a good day." That is what it meant to lead. Not the title. Not the signature on the paycheck. Not the name on the glass. The willingness to sit in the chair, to see what the chair sees, to refuse to look away. And then to go home and make real tacos and pay attention to the person across the table who was the whole reason any of it mattered at all.